The quiet suburban street looked peaceful beneath the bright morning sun, but the silence shattered the moment. An angry young martial arts champion marched across perfectly trimmed lawns toward a retired widowed father washing his old pickup truck. Neighbors stepped onto their porches as the teenager loudly challenged the older man to a fight. Convinced that years of tournament victories and a black belt made him unstoppable, the father simply placed the sponge on the truck's hood and calmly looked into the young man's furious eyes. He had no interest in proving anything. What nobody watching knew was that decades earlier, the quiet neighbor they mocked for living a simple life had once commanded one of the most respected Navy SEAL teams in the country. But the greatest battle he would fight that day would not be with his fists. It would be for the future of a young man who was slowly confusing strength with pride. Before this unforgettable story begins, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who believes in kindness and second chances, and subscribe to Dad's Soul Diaries. Your support allows us to keep sharing emotional stories that remind us true heroes are defined by their hearts, not by their titles. The man's name was Malcolm Reeves. At 56 years old, Malcolm lived quietly with his 16-year-old daughter Tessa in a modest home at the end of Maple Ridge Lane. Years earlier, Malcolm had served his country with extraordinary courage. He spent nearly 20 years in the Navy, eventually leading a highly trained SEAL team through some of the most dangerous rescue operations imaginable. His medals remained locked inside an old wooden box beneath his bed, rarely mentioned and never displayed. After retiring from military service, he lost his wife Nora to a sudden illness. Since then, his greatest mission had become raising Tessa into the compassionate, confident young woman her mother always dreamed she would become. Their life was simple: weekend fishing trips, morning pancakes, helping elderly neighbors repair fences, volunteering at the local food pantry. Malcolm believed strength meant protecting people, not intimidating them. A few houses away lived the Carters. They owned one of the largest homes in the neighborhood. Luxury cars lined their driveway. Expensive landscaping surrounded their property, and success seemed to define everything they touched. Their 17-year-old son, Bryce, was gifted, disciplined, and remarkably talented in martial arts. He had won regional championships and proudly earned his black belt before finishing high school. Unfortunately, victory slowly transformed confidence into arrogance. Bryce began measuring everyone's worth by physical strength. He mocked classmates who avoided confrontation. He laughed at older people struggling with heavy groceries. He believed respect came from fear. His father, Victor Carter, unknowingly encouraged that attitude, constantly reminding Bryce he was born to dominate rather than serve. Everything changed one sunny Saturday morning. Tessa organized a neighborhood fundraiser supporting veterans struggling with post-traumatic stress. Children sold homemade lemonade while volunteers collected donations. Malcolm quietly helped assemble tables before returning home to wash his old pickup. As Bryce drove past in his expensive sports car, he laughed loudly at the aging truck. Moments later, an argument broke out after Bryce deliberately scattered several donation signs while parking carelessly. When Malcolm calmly asked him to move the vehicle so children could safely cross the street, Bryce interpreted the request as disrespect. Fueled by wounded pride and surrounded by curious neighbors, Bryce challenged Malcolm to a fight. People quickly gathered, phones appeared, whispers spread. Malcolm could have embarrassed the teenager within seconds. Instead, he gently shook his head. Walking away, however, only made Bryce louder. The teenager mocked Malcolm's age, his simple clothes, and his quiet personality. Still, Malcolm refused. Not because he was afraid, because experience had taught him something young men often learn too late. The strongest person in any conflict is usually the one who doesn't need to prove it. Finally, Malcolm made a simple proposal. Instead of fighting, he invited Bryce to spend one afternoon with him. If Bryce still wanted to fight afterward, Malcolm promised he wouldn't refuse the conversation. Curiosity defeated anger. Bryce accepted. They spent the afternoon nowhere near a gym. Instead, Malcolm drove him to the Regional Veterans Rehabilitation Center. There, Bryce met soldiers learning to walk again after losing legs during combat. He watched former special operators patiently helping one another button shirts with injured hands. He met fathers who missed birthdays while protecting strangers. One elderly veteran smiled warmly despite permanent injuries that would never heal. Nobody complained, nobody bragged, nobody asked for recognition. Bryce grew unusually quiet. Later, Malcolm took him to the community food pantry. Several veterans volunteered there every weekend. Some struggled financially themselves, yet they spent entire afternoons helping families facing even greater hardship. Again, Bryce noticed something unexpected. Real strength looked remarkably gentle. As evening approached, Malcolm finally revealed a small wooden box inside his garage. Inside rested faded photographs, military patches, and medals. There were no dramatic speeches, only memories. He explained each medal represented teammates rather than personal achievement. Some never returned home, others carried invisible wounds forever. Leading a Navy SEAL team had taught him countless combat techniques, yet the greatest lesson came afterward. Winning fights rarely changed lives. Changing hearts did. Bryce stared silently at one photograph showing Malcolm standing beside young teammates, smiling before deployment. Several faces had tiny stars drawn beside them. Malcolm quietly explained those men sacrificed everything so others could enjoy peaceful mornings, exactly like the one Bryce nearly ruined. Tears quietly formed. For the first time, Bryce understood. Martial arts had taught discipline. His ego had erased its purpose. The following morning, Bryce surprised everyone. He returned to the fundraiser carrying replacement signs. He publicly apologized. Without being asked, he spent the entire day helping elderly residents carry donated supplies. Weeks passed. Neighbors noticed remarkable changes. Bryce stopped showing off expensive possessions. He volunteered coaching younger martial arts students, emphasizing humility before technique. His tournaments continued, but now victories ended with gratitude rather than arrogance. Months later, the Martial Arts Academy invited Malcolm to speak during its annual leadership ceremony. Students expected exciting stories about military combat. Instead, Malcolm spoke about forgiveness, patience, responsibility. He explained that anyone could learn to throw a punch. Far fewer learned when not to. The room stood in complete silence. Even instructors wiped away tears. Victor Carter eventually approached Malcolm privately. Ashamed, he admitted he spent years teaching success without teaching character. Watching Bryce change had transformed him as well. Father and son gradually rebuilt their relationship around service instead of pride. Together they began sponsoring athletic scholarships for children whose families couldn't afford martial arts training. Every recipient also completed community service. Not because kindness earned rewards, because kindness itself was the reward. Years later, Bryce became a respected instructor. His academy displayed no championship trophies in the entrance. Instead, visitors first saw a simple framed sentence. True strength protects, it never humiliates. Every new student learned those words before throwing their first punch. Whenever people asked Bryce who inspired that philosophy, he smiled toward a photograph of an ordinary-looking retired neighbor standing beside volunteers at the Veterans Fundraiser. Most never realized the quiet man once led one of the world's most elite military teams, because Malcolm never wanted to be remembered for battles he fought overseas. He hoped to be remembered for the young life he helped rescue at home. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who believes humility is the greatest form of strength. Leave your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Dad's Soul Diaries. Together, we can spread stories that remind people character always outweighs pride. Before this story ends, please write in the comments, "True strength protects." Your words may inspire someone to choose compassion over conflict today. As another peaceful morning sunlight filled Maple Ridge Lane, children laughed while riding bicycles past Malcolm's home. Years earlier, one angry challenge could have become a fight remembered for violence. Instead, it became a lesson remembered for wisdom. The retired Navy SEAL understood something life had taught him through sacrifice, loss, and service. Real courage is not found in defeating another person. It is found in lifting them higher than they believed possible. Long after medals fade and victories are forgotten, the greatest legacy any person can leave behind is helping someone else become stronger, kinder, and wiser than they were the day before. And sometimes the most powerful warrior in the neighborhood is the one who never throws a single punch.